So it's not really based on market forces. It's based on government decree. So they're getting external debt to do it. They are diluting the money supply greatly to do it. So people are kind of paying for it without necessarily being taxed for it, or really it's just kind of constantly draining. So everybody in that country has to try to keep up with the money supply growth that's happening.
Hey guys, welcome back to Everyday Finance. According to Lyn Alden, it would be against the entire agreement if you had to alter the monetary system in order to wage war when a nation needs to make changes. It would be more obvious if this were done opaquely, its monetary system, and declare, so that they now receive a cost of that conflict that they weren't previously paying for. So it's essentially a change that is measurable. And while we didn't truly have that, it was debatable. The other one would be to emphasize that technology alone is, well, difficult these days. Various environments, and as a result, many countries are experiencing difficulties, which Lyn Alden believe will only get worse. Governments currently find it difficult to impose their own laws, even if the liquidity of these things increases over the next 5 to 10 years' money on their own citizens in Lebanon, Argentina, and Turkey. For example, if a currency depreciates significantly, individuals now have many more ways to get away from it. And here is where things like stable coins come into play in addition to Bitcoin, and lots of things Lyn Alden discuss. So please watch the video to end and share this video and subscribe our channel Everyday Finance. Thanks.
Yes, I have two main kind of answers to that, and they kind of come across different lines. So one would be that the whole reason why that dilution works is because it's non-transparent, right? So, for example, when the U.S. went into the Iraq War, we didn't pay taxes for it. We didn't change anything major about our money system for it, and just over years and decades, we've racked up trillions of dollars of kind of dilution, interest expense, all these other things that kind of now Now, when people talk about the fiscal budget, the fiscal deficits and things like that, they're always talking about Trump and Biden, all this recency bias. They're not talking about stuff like, decisions 20 years ago that compounded into where we are now, right? And so it's kind of like that obfuscation and delay. Now, if you had to change the monetary system to go into the war, that would violate the whole purpose of trying to do this opaquely. It'd be more in your face, right? So anytime a country has to kind of change its monetary system and say, okay, it's now we're going to revert to fiat and dilute people, well, now they get a cost to that war that they weren't paying before. So it's kind of like a change that is actually definable and discussable, whereas we didn't really have that. The other one would be to point out that just technology's challenging now. It's a different environment. And so for a lot of countries are having trouble. And I think this is only going to accelerate in the next 5-10 years as the liquidity of these things gets bigger. But countries now have a tough time imposing their own currency on their own people. I mean, Lebanon and Argentina and Turkey, if a currency gets bad enough, people now have a lot more options to escape from it. And so, and this is where it's not just Bitcoin, but it's also things like stable coins. Money is like a market good in a sense, especially globally. But that has been kind of contained by the fact that until recently, technology was able to silo those pretty efficiently. So if you think about a country, there's really only kind of two main ways to get money in or out of it. One is physical airports, ports of entry, but you can only bring so much cash or gold with you. So you're very tightly controlled there, in or out. Number two would be bank wire transfers. But again, they're all government controlled. And of course, there's fintech things, but they're overlays on top of the banking system anyway. And so all of that is controlled. There's two major ways to get money in or out of a country. And so, for example, I know a Egyptian videographer, and he does work for foreign customers, and he charges in dollars. But by the time the money hits his account, it's in Egyptian pounds. There's a financial barrier there that is, it's hard to access these other monies in these environments. And so let's use Egypt as an example. If you're one of the 105 million people in Egypt, you're in this, little currency monopoly. And the money supply is growing by 20% a year. And it's not that they're fighting wars, but it's instead that they're doing major infrastructure projects. Like they're building whole new cities that is, kind of government decreed, right? So it's not really based on market forces. It's based on government decree. So they're getting external debt to do it. They are diluting the money supply greatly to do it. So people are kind of paying for it without necessarily being taxed for it, or really it's just kind of constantly draining. So everybody in that country has to try to keep up with the money supply growth that's happening. If you're not getting a 20% raise every year, if you're not a small business raising your prices 20% a year, if you're not a landlord raising your rent on your tenants 20% a year, you're getting diluted. You're becoming a smaller share of that monetary network, and you're probably losing, say, dollar global purchasing power if you're not kind of aggressively trying to keep up with that dilution treadmill that's happening. And until pretty recently, there's not that many ways to get out of that currency bubble.
According to Lyn Alden, if you give this another 5, 10, or 15 years, people's acceptance of the notion that they can now access global resources in a way that they couldn't until quite recently, since stablecoins have only been around for 15 years, while Bitcoin has only been around for 15 years. Their scale and liquidity have only truly been relevant for the last 5 years, or around half of that time. The majority of people, and even in that case, you're still in the early adopter stage. If the volume and liquidity of these kinds of marketplaces, along with the improving user experience and legal frameworks, simply growing, Lyn Alden said, in my opinion, and becoming more and more normalized, making it difficult to say, Lyn Alden, no, you like holding dollar stablecoins or Bitcoin. Let's back to the Lyn Alden interview.
I have here's an Egyptian pound, right? 200 Egyptian pounds. And this is, for all intents and purposes, a casino chip, in the sense that outside of Egypt, there's almost nothing I can do with this. I can't buy goods or services with it almost anywhere. And even finding someone to convert it into local currency would be very hard in places in the world. Like, I'm in New Jersey. I wouldn't even know where to begin trying to get this into dollars. And even if I could, the fees and the exchange rate would be awful. It's got extremely low salability. It'd basically be about as hard as converting a casino chip, arguably harder. It's like if there's a casino in Singapore, it's like, if I had a chip here, what am I going to do with it? That's kind of the situation. But what things like Bitcoin and stablecoins do is they go around those prior gateways. And so, for example, if there's a Nigerian graphic designer and I want to pay her, she can show me a QR code on a video call like we're having now, or she can send me an email or a DM, and I can pay her, and it can be in whatever currency she wants. It could be in Bitcoin, it could be in dollar stable coins, it could be in gold-backed stable coins. Those exist. It could be, whatever kind of global competition money she wants. I can actually send it to her, and she has it now in a way that goes around her local banking system. And so we see increasingly Argentinians are turning to things like stablecoin and Bitcoin. Turkey is doing that. Lebanon, they basically hyperinflated and people kind of just forcibly dollarized. And so, if we imagine a world where from the beginning, if we could just teleport gold to each other, if I could just mentally think and teleport gold to you, it would have been very hard for governments to ever impose fiat currencies on us, right? Because fiat currencies materialized because they were solving a problem. So the banking system fixed a lot of the shortcomings of gold, which was its verification, its portability issues, its securely keeping it. So we put our gold in the banks, and it all got centralized and abstracted and levered 20-1. And then when that all blew up, they just said, okay, it's not gold backed anymore, but keep using the bank ledgers. And so it's kind of like a series of steps, one at a time, most of which were solving a problem, and then we got rug pulled. Whereas if from the beginning, if gold was just effective enough that we could just kind of beam it to each other, it never would have materialized in this fiat currency sense. And so the way I would argue that going forward is that now that technology is good enough that people can send money to each other, and it could be Bitcoin, it could be stable coins, it could be gold-backed stable coins, whatever money is winning on the market in a global sense, people can send that to each other now. They can self-custody it if they want to pretty effectively, pretty cheaply, and pretty securely. And it's hard for governments, either a local government or a foreign government, to impose that on people. Basically that they have multiple tools to go around those in a way that were not here before. And so I think both in terms of, I think if you give this another 5, 10, 15 years, people will become increasingly normalized to the idea that they can access global assets now in a way that they could not until pretty recently. You needed both. Bitcoin's only been around for 15 years. Stablecoins have been around for like half of that. But really only in the past 5 years have their size and liquidity been relevant at all for most people. And even then, I mean, that's still the early adopter phase. If the size and liquidity of those types of markets and the user experience and the regulatory frameworks get better and better, those things just increasingly, I think, become normalized. And it becomes hard to say, okay, I know you like holding Bitcoin or dollar stable coins or whatever, but we're gonna find a way to take that away for you and impose our fiat currency. It's like, well, good luck, right? So the whole reason that dilution and kind of bank sanctions and things like that work is because they're not really levered on the individual person. It all kind of happens behind the scenes and it's non-transparent and things change slowly. But when you give people the power themselves, it's hard to go out and try to take that back. And we even see, for example, in Nigeria is an interesting case study. They shut off banking access to all the cryptocurrency exchanges. So they don't even try to make cryptocurrency illegal, but they say, okay, because they can't enforce that really. So instead they say, okay, the banking system can't send money to crypto exchanges. We're going to introduce a CBDC. So they've introduced the E-Naira. I believe it was 2021. They started phasing out cash. Like they basically reduced the amount you can get from ATMs pretty sharply and kind of reducing the supply of bills. And just so far, it's been very ineffective. More people use Bitcoin and stable coins than use the CBDCs, had low adoption. People did riots when they couldn't get enough physical cash to support their fact that their economy is quite cash based. It's kind of hard to enforce more and more mobile payments on a country that's just not ready for it yet. The central bank governor ended up getting deposed, literally arrested. It's just been a whole mess. And while Nigeria is not necessarily the template for other countries, it just shows that going forward with the technology people have, as long as the internet is still the internet, I think it's going to be pretty challenging for some of these things to work going forward like they worked in the past, if you know what I mean.